Let me introduce our panel, or our moderator, who definitely doesn't need an introduction, and probably more people here know him than Gary Vee in this space. We've got Jay McBain, who's an accomplished speaker, author, an innovator in the IT industry. I'm not going to read the whole thing, Jay. It'll go on forever. But I think one of the highlights, definitely, you were named 2021 Channel Influencer of the Year by Channel Partners Magazine. You're very sought after, and you've been in the space. IBM, Lenovo, Autotask, Channelize, Forrester, and now Canalys. And you're a chief analyst for global channels at Canalys, the world's leading analyst firm. And we appreciate it because you are like the 16th person, I think, calling in from a conference somewhere in the United States today. So thank you, Jay, for joining us. And Kevin, I think you're going to bring up the rest of the panel too.
I'm going to. I was about to say, though, what hasn't he done in the channel? I mean, my goodness. Between him and Chris early on, they are the definition of channel. So, all right, here we go. Bringing our esteemed panelists on.
All right, great. Well, thank you so much for that introduction. And I just did a speed test, and I'm getting about 3 megabits up right now. So I hope that the audio and video come through. And like all of us in the channel, we wear a lot of hats. Coming out of RSA earlier this week, and then into Dallas for something today, and then into a security event tomorrow. And we're back post-COVID now, living out of hotel rooms and other things. So this is the deal, and we just fingers crossed that some of this internet in these resorts can hold up to this. But really excited to drive this panel. And when we talk about some of the smartest people in the channel, some of the people leading on the thought leadership side, building innovation, and really driving the MSP business model forward. Very, very excited to have Ian, Jon, and Ben join us today. And I'd love maybe if they could just give a quick 30-second intro on themselves. They could do a better job than I can. Maybe Ian, if you could go first.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've spent my entire career in the channel. I was the head of product over at Datto, helped my brother kind of launch that business and take it to one of the biggest vendors in the channel. I then took on the CEO role here at Zorus, and Zorus is content filtering as well as productivity monitoring. Excited to be here.
Oh, great. On my screen, Jon, you're up next.
Awesome. Well, first off, thanks for the invite. I'm Jon Muchison, CEO and founder of Blackpoint Cyber. I was an IT first, former network engineer turned hacker, spent about 12 years at the National Security Agency and jointly with some other agencies. And now we serve primarily the MSP channel with a full 24/7 managed detection response offering, amongst other products.
That's fantastic. And Ben?
Yeah, Ben Auton, Chief Operations Officer here at SpearTip. Excited to be here today. Definitely a pressing issue. At SpearTip, we run security operations and really assist service providers in proactive and reactive services, providing some expertise to help solve these issues.
Well, that's great. So I'm an analyst, so let me start with a couple of numbers and setting the stage, and then we'll kind of get a lay of the land and look forward a little bit as a panel here. So first and foremost, we follow about 75,000 MSPs around the world. I categorize those companies that are driving more than 30% of their business recurring in MSP contracts, and obviously using professional tool sets to do that and automate that. So that cuts down the number from hundreds of thousands of MSPs down to the 75,000 that really crack the code and everything else. When we talk to those 75,000 companies, 99% of them are engaged in security at some level, and the maturity is obviously a pretty wide bell curve. I'd like to introduce myself to those 1% because I haven't found them yet, but the fact is there might be someone out there that isn't engaged in security in one way. One interesting poll question that came up was, your MSP business today and the infrastructure business today, where do you see yourself going? And over 70% of respondents, kind of pointed to the MSSP model, managed security, as either another practice built onto the MSP model or a full transformation. So that's kind of the current state. I'd love, Ian, to get your perspective of what you're hearing from MSPs.
Yeah, I mean, even back, I left Datto in 2018, and that was when sort of the MSSP was starting to gain some traction. And a lot of MSPs were saying, do we do it in-house or do we work with an MSSP, which would be kind of that 1% now that worked with MSSPs. I think that if you're in this business, you have to have some type of security offering. You have to have security expertise, and you have to do it in-house if you want to continue to scale and to solve the problems of your customers in the future. As we kind of go from MSP to VCIO, I don't know any VCIO that doesn't have some security expertise. And so I think that this is a wake-up call if you're not spending money as an MSP in security and not gaining expertise, you might be falling behind. And now is a good time to get on it and to expand that offering, because I think that represents a lot of new revenue that, there's places where, servers and things like that on-prem where revenue is going away. I think security is the greatest opportunity for MSPs to add net new revenue into their business.
Yeah, and we're measuring that in the hundreds of billions of dollars right now of net additional opportunity for MSPs. John, what are you hearing?
Yeah, so, I think from what we've seen, there's no question the end customer of an MSP thinks they're already handling security. You don't sign up for IT services and say, sorry, I didn't pay for that. Now I got ransomware. I think there's probably a needle to thread. Typically MSSPs serve upmarket larger customers, larger than the typical endpoint of an MSP. And they also, to be a real MSSP, have to be 24/7, right? And what I've noticed is most MSPs are not equipped to go 24/7. So what I think you have to do is establish a core set of tools that you can run in-house that are automated and figure out how to augment to get that coverage. I would say the biggest challenge we're seeing is actually on the sales side. MSPs learning how to pitch it, and also on the tooling side where, to be candid, there's a lot of, I think, lack of education on the stack. Some are spending things, $4 is great, I'm good to go, I've covered everything, and that's not true. And some think 15, and that's probably too high. And so I think, really picking a stack that actually works, it isn't a feel-good checkbox, just compliance-driven solution that you can actually make money on instead of eating the cost. So I think there's a lot of education, but there is absolutely no question your customer expects it. And let's put ourselves in the shoes of the end customer. There's not a lot of SMB America and overseas that survives a full-out ransom attack. People's livelihoods are on the line. So it's really incumbent on us as security professionals and MSP to take it deadly serious, because it's just a moral, ethical thing.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the stack, early on here. As an analyst, we're watching 4,300 security companies, technology companies at the moment. And 2,000 of them, which is more in my world, have created a channel program. They've hired some sort of channel chief. They've got some sort of portal and everything else. So a minimum viable thing. So what MSPs I'm hearing is there's just so much noise and clutter. It was great to hear from Gary Vee and stuff on good marketing, but we see a lot of bad marketing. And, I get to follow Discord and Reddit and the Facebook groups and the LinkedIn groups, and every day hearing complaints from MSPs that they're just getting absolutely bombarded. And it's very difficult to think through a 6 or 7 layer tech stack behind what an MSSP is and how to execute it different than what they may have been doing, so far. So, Ben, what are you hearing, and what are your partners feeding back to you?
Yeah, absolutely. And just like Ian and John were saying, you really have to have trust in your security provider as an MSP, because it's one of those issues that ransomware, business email compromise, it's not necessarily the MSP's fault. But that responsibility tends to land in their wheelhouse. And there's just so many widgets out there for security at this point that kind of ad hoc, widget-based approach just really leads to a lot of difficulty in implementing an effective cyber solution. And just would completely agree with John that really it's about how do you layer in that 24/7 security operations coverage to really power some of those solutions to be able to effectively respond. In our incident response practice, there's always an MSP involved in an incident typically, even if they weren't the one impacted. And we just see this expectation from the client that, they were supposed to take care of this, but at the same time, it's okay to monetize this opportunity, and it's okay to ask your clients to be able to invest in effective cyber solutions, not just taking that compliance approach.
Yeah, absolutely. We're living in obviously unprecedented times, and from a macro level, MSPs are facing, from supply chain issues to inflation issues, a war in Europe that none of us would have predicted would happen in our lifetime. And, I could probably list off 12 other things happening at a macro level right now. So, security is coming into focus at different threat vectors, different surface areas that we would have even had talked about on this panel maybe even 6 months ago. So what is the current guidance that you're giving? You're experts in this field. You're driving this industry forward. Like I said, there's a lot of noise and confusion out there. How do you narrow it down, focus, and help kind of MSPs with their clients through these kind of times, mid 2022? So, Ian.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, and these guys were sort of voicing it before, you got to pick and choose your vendors. And, I would say don't get wowed by the name factor or, the name brand of vendors. Really understand the relationship and the expectations with the SLAs and the support. I think that a lot of MSPs have been burned by some big names because they're essentially just looking at, who are my top revenue drivers, and I'm going to give them the best support. And unfortunately, MSPs fall at the bottom of that list. And so every year they come out with a new MSP program, but that means their last MSP program they can't. And so I think that, MSPs got to make a really conscious choice of picking who their vendors are working with, have a relationship with them, and have an expectation that the vendor can be able to live up to. I think that's the best thing because these, when something hits the fan, it's obviously not something that you were planning on having happen, but you got to know who you can talk to, who you can call, and can you be able to save that customer and that relationship, and that comes from, that vendor being able to provide the services that they promised to provide and in the time frame that they promised to do it in.
Yeah, absolutely. And there can be confusion. There's obviously a lot going on, and building trust can be difficult in times of noise and clutter and things like that. But the one thing the MSP industry now over 20 years has had the benefit of is time. So we understand the model more. We understand the price per user and the profitability and obviously the stack and things like that. We've had enough time to tease out enough P&Ls and things. Datto's done a great job. I used to work at Autotask pre-Datto days, but helping MSPs forward as well as other companies. You've got companies today like one of the sponsors of this event, Gradient, that's digging into the model and things like that and producing insights and stuff. But the MSSP model and what that cost per user and what that stack looks like and how you move forward, especially in the second half of this year, becomes another conversation, much more tactical, much more at the grassroots. So, Jon, where are you leading your partners and the industry as a whole?
Yeah, I think right now, I agree with you. We're entering into, I think, a softening economy, right? And this is going to cause, the vendor community is going to have to sharpen their pencils and add more value, because there's only a certain amount of willingness to pay on the end customer. Even though we all recognize when you connect your network up to the worst neighborhood in the world called the internet, and you decide to do commerce over it, you should probably spend a little bit more to protect it. But I'd say one thing we're really trying to push is it's a riff on the kind of 5 pillars in NIST. On how to look at a network. You need a little bit of a common lens. So we look at it as step one, you need some sort of technology to allow you to do asset identification. You can't protect if you don't know what you have. You need to know your operating systems, patch levels, installed applications. So 2 technologies that help get you there. Vulnerability management, obviously, and your RMM. Your RMM has a ton of data, and you got to protect that sucker like your crown jewels, because when that gets taken over, it's a God mode backdoor that can do whatever. The second one is NIST would call it protect. That means nothing to me. Hardening. This is reducing your attack surface. MFA, least privilege, regular external vulnerability scanning, making sure your vendors are doing application penetration testing on their product, which, I think the big vendors are getting a lot better at it right now, but it's a key area because that's where cloud can be great until it's not, and that's a house of cards. The third one is really on the detection side. I would think our industry as a whole is so over infatuated with malware and exploits, even though huge deal. 86% of our responses have no alerts from AV or EDR, and we integrate them. That means we had to take someone out of the network, and it didn't. It's not because those tools are bad. In fact, they got good, and they forced bad guys to look like IT guys and use the same tools. So using free trials of RMMs and kind of network, enumeration tools. So third pillar is detect. You need two parts to that: malware and behavior. We call it tradecraft, but that's that active adversaries in the network trying to figure out where he is, trying to expand his access, testing creds. You need to be able to catch that live. Because the dirty secret, I hate the marketing that is like, the average hacker's in your network 90, 180 days. It's BS. It's BS most of the time. That's true in nation state attacks when they want to steal data and not get caught. It's not true in ransomware attacks. We're dealing with hours to days. The third one is response, but it should really be real-time response. It has to be fast. Speed matters. And if you're doing it right, you should be responding most of the time before the adversary has their full suite of malicious tool set down. That's a really key area. And then the last area, so all that's left of boom, right? That's how you should think of it, in a big investment. And then right of boom, Ian and your brother were a huge part of that, like great backup solutions. That's a big part, tabletop exercises, having a plan, making sure you have cyber insurance and you're insurable. So I would say, for us, we're trying to train our MSPs, and this is the stack you should look at yourself with. This is how you should assess your customers and prospects network, and then pick the most efficient, laser-focused tools on the most likely course of exploitation. And I think the education challenges on that most likely course. We see, and I would say, no, we might be a little biased. We don't believe big log-based systems are effective in line rate response operations. They're pretty good for cleanup operations, defer and things like that. So be careful on I integrate with everything and I have a pretty dashboard and then, I'll magically stop a hacker. I don't think, we haven't seen that in practice work terribly effectively.
All right, so I think we may have lost Jay.
His 3 megabits went to 0.1.
Yeah, and I don't even know if we have his question. So, but I know this is a veteran crew, and Kevin's coming in to bail me out on this security part. I think we might have Jay back. So let's see if we can get him back in here.
Yeah, I mean, and just to follow on that, I mean, and John, kind of interested in your thoughts on the education side of the user, the end user, and then because obviously in what we do in content filtering and productivity monitoring, like we're watching the user, the end user, use the internet, and it seems to be the behavior is where you can really kind of figure out, okay, this is like a high risk machine, because your security is only so good as whoever has the keys to the door, and they open the door and let it right in. Like, that's what's really difficult. I mean, what do you see on the education side of that?
I think it's definitely, education has to be part of it. I mean, probably letting a secret out with my own employee base. I have our threat operations work on spear phishing operations against our own employees, and I want them to win. I actually want our employees to lose on this one because it's education moment. The one rule of thumb, obviously I ran operations for the first half of my life, and you can trick any human once. It's like almost a universal trait. But the thing is, you can weaponize your employees to be part of your sensor package. The other thing, and this is really nuanced and not so as much in the MSP space, but I would say upmarket and larger enterprises, don't sleep on the fact that hackers, if they're purposely targeting you, are going to start on LinkedIn and try and make a social network map of your domain administrators, your network engineers, and make sure you have a policy where they're not listing all the products they use, and don't do that in your job descriptions either when you're looking for new folks. I can assure you that's where I would start first before going after any company, so I know what I'm going to run into. So I think there's a little bit of policy, education, super important, but then it's got to be augmented with just, the hardcore tradecraft detection. And then it's actually not that hard to stop this stuff, to be candid. So it's got to kind of come together.
Careful what you say.
I know. I'm probably going to eat my words tonight.
Well, we're wrapping together actually two things we've talked about. One is, before I got dropped, empowering this new customer who, may think they know enough to be dangerous now. This morning they read about NIST, in the New York Times. Yesterday they read a Fortune article about zero trust. On CNN the other night they saw something on SASE. So they're starting to drop acronyms, and they start to think they have that. So education is absolutely a key point. And hopefully I'm going in order here, but Ben, love to hear your take.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just some great points made. I think for us, we just see a lot of people try and just implement solution after solution. They build this whole stack of things that they have to manage. Everything's just a distributed, 5 different consoles they need to log into to actually manage it. And we just see a trend over time that the effective solutions are going to be those that really just partner with organizations, especially MSPs, and help them manage and mitigate that risk. They're not trying to sell a single piece of software or trying to build a 15, application solution to the problem, but they're just ready to provide that turnkey support for the MSP to actually give some of that trust and validation that when something bad happens, because like Jon said, anyone falls for anything once. So when it happens, the expertise and the ability to respond is there.
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing that I think we're seeing now, and it's a lot of trends, big trends, the future of work and things we're seeing, the great resignation and things. So over 22 years, the MSP market never broke 30%. 30% of companies who outsource some or all of their IT. And it was a very similar number to outsourcing to India in the 80s, 90s, and things like that. But when you ask the question about security, do you have the capabilities, whether you're a Fortune-sized company or you're just that little retailer at the end of the block? Do you have the skills? Do you have the capabilities? Do you understand how big the problem is? We're breaking past that barrier quickly. And the answer we're getting back in research is no one can do it alone. You can be the biggest bank. You can be the biggest pharmaceutical company. The bigger you are, the bigger your target. So therefore, no one does this alone. And for MSPs, MSSPs, everyone in your local community is looking for help. And we've got to be able to figure out how to scale that, how to repeat that, and again, how to come at it from something that's high trust. So Ian, just kind of looking forward, and we've talked a lot about trends, we talked about the tech stack, we talked about the emboldened, empowered customer, looking forward, maybe, even into next year's planning, what do MSPs look at? What should they be thinking about? What should they be doing in your perspective?
Yeah, I always think about sort of revenue first for the MSP, and they got to really take a hard look at their menu and make sure that what they're offering is attractive to customers and that they can be able to explain it and they can be able to show the value and they can ultimately be able to deliver on the value that they said that they could do. So when you look at your menu of options and the things that you're offering to customers as solutions, you have to understand what are the problems? Have they seen that problem before? Can you explain that problem? And then when you think about, okay, now you've sold them, how are you continuing to build the value? And that's where I feel like some of the best MSPs that I talk to are really heavy on these reporting to the end customer. Because security is kind of like, it's in the background. You don't really know, and it feels like they're paying for a lot and getting nothing. If the best case scenario happens, they don't get attacked or attack doesn't work. And so that's where I lean heavily on reporting to say, do you have a good report that you can easily send to customers on a consistent basis that shows what the security solutions are doing and how they're benefiting this user, and give some, data about here, if you didn't have this, what you would potentially lose or what's at risk, and what's going on in the scenes. And I think that that's where a lot of MSPs stumble, is when they sell something and then the customer spends a year on this high security solution and then go, I got to cut this from my budget because there's a war in Russia. And it's like, well, okay, and that's I blame the MSP sometimes of just saying, hey, did you consistently show the value, and did you provide reports, and did you explain to them what they're doing on the back end? Because ultimately the end customer should say, like, this is something I have to have. This is like an airbag. I can't buy a car without an airbag. I gotta have this. And right. And so that's really what I think is most important for their, to continue their business.
That's great. So, John, one part strategy, one part tactical. What do MSPs take away from this?
I think Ian just nailed something that's even a problem for us. It's like a perceived value challenge, right? The reality is most networks are not owned. There's so much FUD out there. Customers will test a product, do a POC, and like, what'd you find? Sometimes it's like, sorry, you're clean. It's good. So he's spot on with the reporting. And I think one area that will be really important to help show continuing value, because the reality is, when you save someone and you saved them from what was likely an existential business event, they love you. That's a small percentage, big picture of all the total customers you protect. Going heavy on hygiene reporting, vulnerability scanning, showing value there is something. Everyone's going to have hygiene issues. They're always going to have that. I would say another thing, we just released a whole live response product for Azure. You got to make sure we're moving very much hybrid environments. That Azure environment, especially on kind of like password spraying and logins and hygiene in there, is always a moving target. So much is changing there. So you really got to merge those two worlds together. And so Ian touched on the single greatest challenge, I think, in MSP is it's pricing, packaging, and continuing, value demonstration. And many times it's like insurance. I mean, if you live on the beach in Florida, you're likely not going to have, you're going to have hurricane insurance, right? And it's kind of the same reason in the business. And so I think that's the greatest challenge we have as an industry, and as the MSPs and us as vendors, have to do more to help the MSP be able to show that value and also pitch it, because that you sell to a construction company. They don't know the difference between the next gen firewall you sold them last year and now the EDR, the MDR service, or the email security solution. And so you got to put it in layman's terms in a simple framework. That's why I kind of like that 5-pillar NIST thing, is anyone can kind of understand it. You can kind of equate it to your house.
Yeah, absolutely. You've reminded me to re-up my hurricane insurance in Florida. So Ben, we're going to give you kind of the last word here. Bring it home from a strategy, tactical perspective. Where do MSPs go from here?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's driving value, but also just looking to those vendors to do better to drive value for you and to be able to help present those use cases. Just being in the channel for a while, you can tell that some of these product solutions or some of those on the market, they're just not built for service providers. And it's wanting to partner with those service providers, the people first companies that are really going to help articulate that risk and, be there for you when the worst comes for you. So, I think that's a key takeaway. It's just to assess that before you engage with the solution. Is it going to be able to be explained to my customers? Does a pricing model match my business and the way that I'm pricing? And you want to make sure you have that alignment prior to implementing those new solutions.
Well, that's great. Thank you so much for the three of you. This has been insanely valuable for 35 minutes. I'd like to bring on Matt and Kevin back and close out the panel here. Thank you so much again.
Thanks. Yeah. Great questions.
Yeah, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks. And Jay, outside of you dropping off for that 1 second, I can't believe how well the 3 megabytes have held up there.
By the way, the video has been frozen on my side, so I'm just talking into a blank screen, but evidently the audio is working. So
yeah, no, in the video, I'm seeing pure video for you right now. So the whole time I've been seeing, so it's been fine.
Well, thanks, guys.
Yeah,
right, thanks,
well done. Thanks, Jay.
All right, actually, I'll let you recap because I know I got to get Caitlin, let her know to come back on.
No, a couple of my favorites there, certainly with Jay, Ian, and John, and that was certainly a great panel. A lot of good nuggets. I mean, I think it was one of the questions for Gary is how do you sell cybersecurity without selling FUD or just straight fear selling, and I think these guys touched on a little bit of it. It's challenging, right? I think John mentioned just how much more complex it's getting, layering in different security technologies, and it is up to the vendors. You're absolutely right. It's up to the vendors to teach and walk their partners through how to sell it effectively, especially as it gets more complex. And so definitely some good nuggets there from that panel.